Welcome back to this deep dive. I'm really glad you're here joining us today.
Yeah, it's great to have you with us.
Because today we are going to do something, well, something just a little bit different than our usual format.
A lot different, actually.
Right. Usually, we tackle a subject, we break it down into neat little pieces, and we send you on your way.
Yeah.
But today, I want to invite you into a room.
And it is a very, very specific room.
It is. I want you to imagine it's a hot summer evening. July 27, 1967.
Peak summer.
Exactly. We are in Elmira, New York. There's a woman named Jane Roberts, her husband Rob, and they are sitting with a guest, a guy named Pete.
Right.
And they are all just sitting there waiting for a personality named Seth to show up.
And for those who might be new to this specific setup, showing up means speaking through Jane while she is in a trance state.
Yeah, which is wild to even picture. It's like a cosmic conference call, except instead of a bad Zoom connection, you're dealing with, interdimensional consciousness.
That's a great way to put it.
And honestly, sometimes the connection on this cosmic call is crystal clear, and sometimes you get a random monologue about ostriches.
Oh, we are definitely going to talk about the ostriches later.
Oh, you have to. It's mandatory.
Yeah.
But before we get lost in the menagerie, let's set the ground rules and do some quick housekeeping.
Right, the mandatory details.
Yes. So we are diving specifically into session 356 of the early sessions, book 8 of the Seth material, recorded, as I said, on July 27, 1967.
And we absolutely have to credit the publisher here. This material is published by the New Awareness Network. They've done just an incredible job preserving all these archives so we can actually study them today.
They really have.
Yeah.
And we also need to state for the record, this podcast is distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes.
Educational being the key word there.
Exactly. We are here to explore the ideas. We are not here to tell you what to believe or take sides on any weird metaphysical debates. We are just two people reading a fascinating transcript and trying to figure out why an entity from another dimension is giving medical advice about peanut butter.
It does sound completely absurd when you put it like that, but honestly, that is the beauty of this specific session.
It swings wildly, doesn't it?
It really does. It goes from the wildly metaphysical, deep theories about how time doesn't even exist as a linear track, straight down to the incredibly mundane.
So how would you define our mission for today's deep dive?
I'd say our mission is to unpack a session that is essentially a masterclass in Gestalt.
Gestalt.
Yeah. It's a German word meaning shape or form, but in psychology it means looking at the whole unified system rather than just the individual parts.
Right, the sum is greater than the parts.
Exactly. So Seth looks at a human body, he looks at a family dynamic, he even looks at a horse race, and he sees the hidden structural connections that we usually completely miss.
Okay, I love that. Let's jump right in. The session starts with a bit of a stare down, doesn't it?
It totally does. Pete, the guest, is just sitting there. He's clearly a bit skeptical, or at the very least, he is highly observant.
He's watching Jane like a hawk.
Right. He's watching Jane or Seth very, very closely. And Seth, right out of the gate, just flips the script on him. He says, "You may indeed sit there and observe me, but I also sit here and observe you."
Man, that gives me chills. It's such a stark reminder that this isn't just a parlor trick or a performance, it's a two-way mirror.
Yes, Seth is immediately establishing dominance in the room, but polite dominance.
Polite but firm. And he doesn't waste any time with pleasantries either. He immediately starts playing doctor. He looks at Pete and just says, "I am picking up a bad stumble."
Yeah, and this is where we get into what I like to call the cosmic chiropractor segment.
The cosmic chiropractor.
Right, because Seth isn't looking at Pete's aura or his chakras initially. He's looking straight at his physical vertebrae. He identifies a very specific issue with the third vertebra.
He mentions unequal nerve pressure. Now, I am definitely not a doctor, but that sounds exactly like sciatica or a pinched nerve or something similar.
It's incredibly specific. Seth says this bad stumble happened some time ago, but it was aggravated by a second incident. The result is this bunching of muscles in the neck and shoulders.
He even describes it as feeling like a hard lump.
Right. And usually if you go to a medium or a psychic, they tell you to, burn some sage or meditate on a pink cloud.
Drink some dandelion tea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Seth prescribes yoga.
Not just generic yoga either. He gives Pete a very specific targeted prescription. 2 moves.
The first one is the cobra.
That's the one where you lie on your stomach and push your chest up with your arms, right, looking up at the ceiling?
That's the one. And the second is the sitting forward stretch. But here is the key, and this is where the deep dive really gets interesting. Seth is incredibly particular about the execution of these poses.
He tells him to do them very slowly.
Exactly. Very slowly.
Why the intense emphasis on speed, or rather the lack of it?
Because this isn't about fitness for Seth. It's not about getting a sweat on. It's about manipulating the subtle energy flow along the spine.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. If you rush through a yoga pose, you're mostly just stretching the physical muscle. But if you do it slowly, with deliberate intent, Seth implies you are actually adjusting the nerve impulses themselves.
That makes a lot of sense.
He tells Pete to do only one of each pose per day for 2 weeks.
One a day. Sign me up. That is the easiest workout plan I've ever heard in my life.
It sounds easy, but it's not about volume. It's about precision. He explicitly warns Pete that if he overdoes it, he'll just agitate the nerve further. It's a surprisingly grounded, deeply physiological approach to healing.
It is. It's fascinating that an entity cares about the physical vessel so much. I tend to think of these channeled personalities as being sort of above all that flesh and bone stuff.
A lot of people assume that. But on the contrary, Seth often argues that you cannot have high-quality spiritual experiences if your biological vehicle is broken.
You need a stable platform.
Precisely. You need a solid foundation. And that concept leads us directly to the next part of the session, involving Pete's brother, Stephen.
Ah, Stephen.
Yeah.
The man with the confused body chemistry.
Yes. So Seth takes a metaphysical look at Stephen, who, by the way, isn't even in the room. He's doing this remotely. And he diagnoses Stephen with an actual, though not drastic, starvation of tissues.
Starvation of tissues. That sounds terrifying. Was Stephen not eating at all?
Well, it seems Stephen was heavily experimenting with his diets, maybe fasting, maybe cutting out entire food groups aggressively.
I said diets.
Exactly. Seth notes an alternating change of diet, like 1 week he's eating absolutely everything and the next week he's eating nothing at all.
That sounds like every single person I know on January 1st.
Right. It's very relatable. But Seth is highly critical of this yo-yo approach. He says, and I'll quote, "No whole body of foods such as carbohydrates should be drastically reduced."
Wait, hold on a second. Seth is pro-carbs?
Seth is pro-balance. You have to remember, this is 1967. The Atkins diet wasn't exactly a mainstream craze yet, but people were still experimenting with extreme restriction.
Sure, breadfruit diets and all that.
Yeah. And Seth explains that when you cut out carbohydrates entirely, you are denying the body the sustaining fats that are actually derived from those carbs.
So he's basically looking across a dimensional veil and saying, eat the bread, Stephen.
He's saying that extreme elimination diets confuse the body's natural chemistry. And when the chemistry is confused, the consciousness that resides in that body gets static on the line.
The signal gets degraded.
Exactly. And then he gives what is probably the most famous, or at least the most amusing piece of advice in this entire session.
The peanut butter.
The peanut butter. He says, incidentally, I suggest some peanut butter.
I love this so much. Just imagine traversing the astral planes, contacting a higher intelligence, asking for the deepest secrets of the universe, and getting told, go buy a jar of Jif.
It's hilarious. But if you think about what actually is peanut butter?
Well, it's delicious, for starters.
True. But chemically speaking, it's incredibly dense. It's fatty. It's protein rich. It is a fundamentally grounding food.
Oh, I see where you're going.
Right. If Stephen is out there starving his tissues and feeling lightheaded or unmoored from his physical body, peanut butter is like an anchor. It literally pulls you back into your dense physical form.
It's just so surprisingly practical.
That is the ultimate Seth signature. The spiritual and the physical are not separate domains. If you want to talk to ghosts or explore the cosmos, first you have to fix your back and eat a sandwich. You have to be fully here before you can go there.
That's a great takeaway. Okay, speaking of going there, let's pivot and talk about the horse race, because this is where the deep dive gets a little mind-bending.
Yeah, this is the absolute centerpiece of the session regarding the nature of time and probability.
So the basic backstory is that Pete, along with a spirit entity named Ferd, tried to use their psychic abilities to predict the winner of a horse race, all to help Stephen win a bet.
A very noble cause, obviously.
Right, like I see dead people, and they gave me a hot tip for the Kentucky Derby.
Exactly. And the crazy thing is, Pete actually got a hit. He saw a big win. The probability was definitely there. So he placed the bet, and he completely lost.
Now, normally your average skeptic would look at that outcome and say, well, there's your proof positive. It's all fake. You're not psychic. You're just guessing, and you guess wrong.
And for most people, that would be the end of the conversation. But Seth offers an explanation here that is essentially quantum physics, decades before we really had the mainstream vocabulary for it.
He calls it an understandable error.
Yes, with compassionate understanding. He doesn't mock Pete. He explains how a prediction can be completely right and completely wrong at the exact same time.
Which hurts my brain. How does that work?
It's all because of the time gap. Seth explains that when Pete and Ferd looked into the future, they saw a probable future. At that specific moment in time, the energy was perfectly lined up for that particular horse to win. It was a valid, existing reality.
Okay, so the car was firmly headed toward that specific destination.
Yes. But there were 2 full days between the moment of the prediction and the actual race. And Seth drops this incredible line. Let me make sure I get this exactly right.
Yeah, let's hear the quote.
He says, "It is possible to perceive the future as it will be. On the other hand, the future itself is always changing, for you change it in the present."
That is the 5% rule we talked about earlier. You can perceive a future, but you change it in the present.
Exactly.
So what actually changed in those 2 days? Did the horse pull a muscle? Did the jockey get sick?
No, and this is the wildest part of the whole concept. Seth says the big win was intricately connected to a series of trivial events involving Stephen.
Trivial events.
Specifically, Stephen was supposed to casually meet 2 men during those 2 intervening
Let's
days.
just meet 2 random guys.
Just a completely casual encounter. But for whatever reason, those meetings didn't happen. And because those tiny, seemingly irrelevant events failed to materialize, the entire gestalt, the whole structural fabric of that specific future shifted. The probability where the horse wins simply collapsed. And a new probability where the horse loses took its place and became the physical reality.
This is literally the butterfly effect.
It is exactly the butterfly effect. We tend to think that big, dramatic events, like a horse winning a major race, are caused solely by big things, like how fast the horse is or how it trained.
Right, the direct physical causes.
But Seth is saying no. The big event is tethered to 1,000 tiny invisible threads. If you cut just one thread, like not saying hello to a guy at the grocery store, the whole tapestry unravels and weaves a new picture.
That is genuinely terrifying to think about. It means we have absolutely no idea what massive impact our smallest daily actions are having on the timeline.
It is terrifying, but it's also deeply empowering. It means the future isn't a fixed track written in stone. It's a swirling cloud of probabilities. We are constantly navigating through that cloud, making choices in the present moment that solidify one path and dissolve countless others.
So the present is always actively editing the script.
Yes.
But Seth doesn't just stop at explaining the quantum mechanics of it all. He also gives Pete a bit of a stern lecture, doesn't he?
He really does. He questions the entire motive behind the exercise. He warns that living your life trying to predict outcomes purely for financial gain actually stunts your character development.
Character development. That sounds exactly like something a strict father says when he refuses to buy you a car. Walk to school. It builds character.
It totally does sound annoying to hear in the moment, but think about it from a soul's perspective. If you always knew the outcome of every bet, every stock trade, every single relationship before it started, would you ever actually learn resilience?
No, you'd never experience friction.
Exactly. Would you ever learn to trust your own judgment or recover from failure? You wouldn't.
You'd basically just be following a cheat sheet for your entire life.
Right. Seth implies that the uncertainty of physical life is a feature. It is not a bug. We are here specifically to learn how to deal with the unknown. If we used psychic abilities to remove all risk and all surprise, we'd basically be playing a video game in God mode.
Yeah, which is fun for about 5 minutes, and then it's just pointless and boring.
Exactly. So in a weird cosmic way, Pete losing that bet was actually much better for his spiritual growth than winning it would have been.
Seth seems to strongly think so. He even suggests that Pete's own subconscious might have actively blocked the win just to prevent him from becoming psychologically dependent on these psychic shortcuts.
I may have to try using that excuse the next time I fail at something. I didn't lose. I just successfully avoided a probability that would have made me lazy.
Honestly, it's a great reframe.
It really is.
Okay, let's move to the next segment because the session takes a hard, sudden left turn right about here. Seth asks for a moment, and then he just starts unleashing this rapid-fire stream of consciousness.
Yeah, it's a massive shift in tone.
It's like he's wildly flipping through channels on a TV.
This is a classic demonstration of psychometry.
Break that down for us. What is psychometry in this context?
It's essentially the ability to read the psychic environment or the hidden history of the sitter, in this case, Pete, Seth is tuning into Pete's energetic frequency, and the list of impressions that he starts firing off is just so random and chaotic.
He mentions the initials R and J. He talks about an Australian residence, a room that looks bare but actually isn't, and then ostriches.
Just the word by itself, ostriches.
Why? I mean, really, why would a highly evolved, multidimensional entity interrupt a profound lecture on the quantum nature of time to just blurt out ostriches?
I think it beautifully illustrates how this kind of information actually comes through the channel. It's rarely a neat linear narrative. It's a flash, a raw symbol. It's like Seth is rapidly scrolling through Pete's internal family photo album and just shouting out the weirdest Polaroids he sees.
And then the details start getting incredibly, almost uncomfortably specific. He starts describing actual people. There's a grandmother figure.
Yes, and listen to the granularity of these details. He says she has strange, darkish gray hair, a specific mole on her right cheek, and a voice with a distinct clicking sound.
A clicking sound. What does that even mean? Like a denture click or some kind of regional speech impediment.
Seth doesn't specify the medical cause, but that's exactly the kind of detail you just can't make up. If you were faking a ghost story to impress someone, you'd say, I see a loving older woman with a warm laugh.
Right.
You absolutely wouldn't say, she clicked when she talked. That bizarre specificity is what gives the reading such immense validity.
And then there's a character he calls the walking man.
Right. A man in his prime, brown hair, a mustache. But then Seth zooms right in on the guy's mouth. He notes that the two front teeth are more yellowed than the others.
Again, who writes that character description? He was dashing and handsome, except for some severe plaque buildup on the central incisors.
It's so oddly human, and the voice. Seth actually imitates the rhythm of this man's speech. He says the man had a very nasal voice and used frequent extra breaths between his words. And he would insert these uhs in the middle of sentences.
Oh, like a verbal tick.
Yeah, Seth mimics it.
Man, I feel like I can vividly hear that specific, irritating cadence. It's so perfectly mundane, it just feels undeniably real.
And this is where the humor creeps back in. Seth senses some sort of strong connection to geese regarding this man, and he just casually remarks, perhaps he had a pet goose. I would not want a pet goose.
I love that Seth has personal boundaries. He can effortlessly transcend time and space, but he firmly draws the line at keeping waterfowl as pets.
It really humanizes the entity. It shows that Seth has personal preferences and a sense of humor, but more importantly, all these weird random details, the ostriches, the clicking voice, the yellow teeth, they serve a very specific structural purpose.
They are building a case.
Exactly. Seth is proving to Pete, look, I know your people. I can see the granular, messy details of your history. You can trust what I'm about to tell you.
And once that profound trust is established, he really drops the hammer. He moves seamlessly from these quirky physical descriptions to the deep, painful emotional currents running through Pete's family.
This brings us to the family gestalt section. And honestly, this part of the transcript could be pulled straight out of a session with a modern, high-end family systems therapist.
He focuses entirely on Pete's mother. He describes a very traumatic scene from when she was just 6 years old.
He paints the picture. 3 children in a kitchen, a bitter argument, a slamming door, water or swans nearby, and a small cat was involved. And in that very moment, a lifelong psychological pattern was set in stone. She internalized the feeling that the entire family was perpetually lined up against her.
Seth says she carries a smoldering resentment, and he specifically mentions she deeply wanted to be male because she resented the limitations of the female role she was forced into.
Which, if you put it in the context of the early 20th century when she was growing up, is a profoundly understandable trauma to carry.
Absolutely.
But Seth doesn't just diagnose her individual pain. He explains how this specific trauma created a functional system for everyone else. He refers to the family as a gestalt, a unified, interdependent psychic structure.
And what exactly is the mother's role within this family structure?
She serves as the lightning rod.
Break that down for us.
Seth essentially says that she picks up the latent aggression of the entire family, and then she reacts for all of them. Basically, she actively acts out the anger and frustration that everyone else is feeling, but politely suppressing.
So because she's the one always screaming or yelling or being generally difficult, everyone else gets to comfortably play the role of the calm, rational ones.
That is exactly it. They get to point at her and say, wow, mom is so crazy, which conveniently allows them to completely ignore their own internal aggression. They blame her relentlessly, but on a subconscious level, they actually need her to be that way.
She is dissipating the toxic energy for the whole group.
Yes. It's a classic systems theory concept, but Seth is explaining it in 1967.
That is incredibly heavy. It completely reframes the modern idea of a toxic family member.
It really does. It shifts the perspective away from pure judgment and moves it toward function. She isn't just being mean or difficult in a vacuum. She is carrying a massive emotional load for the collective.
And Seth says Pete is the opposite pole in this dynamic.
Right.
Right.
Pete is the loyalist. He's the good guy trying to keep the peace. But the crucial insight is that Pete can only comfortably be the good guy because his mother is willing to play the bad guy. They are locked together in this complex emotional dance.
And where does the Australia imagery fit into all this? We had the random mention of ostriches earlier.
Seth beautifully ties it all back together. He says that for this deeply fractured family, Australia represents a uniting promise for the future.
It's a shared dream.
Yes, it's the unifying mythology of the family. One day, things will be better. One day, we will go to Australia.
It's the eternal someday.
Exactly. It's the psychological glue. Even when they are fighting bitterly and the mother is acting as the lightning rod, they have this shared foundational dream of a better life in a distant, exotic land. That dream is what actually holds the family gestalt together from completely breaking apart.
It's just so beautiful and tragic at the exact same time.
Well, that's family for you.
True.
Yeah.
Now, before we move on, we have to briefly mention Ferd again.
Ah, yes.
The spirit entity who helped Pete with the disastrous horse race prediction.
Poor Ferd.
Seth implies that Ferd is a bit of a rookie in the afterlife, doesn't he?
He does. He describes Ferd as someone who is still learning to manipulate within his new condition.
I just love the idea of a ghost school. Like, just because you drop your physical body and die doesn't mean you instantly possess omniscient knowledge of how to communicate across dimensions.
Right. You don't just magically get an afterlife instruction manual. You have to actually learn the physics of the non-physical world.
Seth says Ferd has serious trouble holding the energy focus required to speak clearly. It's like he's at the gym trying to lift a very heavy weight, and his muscles are just shaking and giving out.
And he explains that because Ferd lacks that sharp focus, their communication is primarily emotionally based. They have to rely on charged symbols.
Which explains the earlier weirdness.
Exactly. That's why the psychometry imagery was so scattered. The ostriches, the clicking, the yellow teeth. These weren't literal, straightforward messages. They were dense, emotional packets of data that Ferd was desperately trying to throw across the dimensional void to Pete.
So if you're trying to hear from a departed loved one, you shouldn't be looking for perfectly articulated sentences. You should look for feelings.
Look for the raw symbols that evoke a strong feeling in you. That is the actual language of the other side.
That's a profound shift in how we think about mediumship.
It takes it from a parlor trick to an emotional resonance.
So as we start to wrap up this incredible session, I want to touch on the very end of the transcript. Apparently, Jane's physical voice actually changes.
Yes, the notes indicate a shift, and Seth makes a little joke as he's closing out. He casually mentions that he could easily shatter the windows with the sheer volume of his voice if he truly wanted to.
But he restrains himself.
He does. He says he respects the neighbors too much for that. It's just a polite little flex. I have infinite cosmic power, but I will keep it down so you guys don't get a noise complaint from next door.
What a multi-dimensional gentleman.
Indeed. It's a great note to end the channeling on.
It really is. So, looking back, we have covered a truly massive amount of ground today. We've gone from spinal adjustments and diet tips all the way to quantum mechanics and deep family therapy. If we had to distill this entire session down for you listening right now, what are the big actionable takeaways?
I think there are three main pillars we can extract here. Number one is definitely the body.
The physical vessel.
Right. You absolutely cannot ignore the physical in pursuit of the spiritual. If you want to expand your consciousness, you have to stabilize your baseline chemistry first. Do your yoga, but do it slowly and intentionally. Don't starve your tissues with extreme fad diets. And seriously, eat some peanut butter. Ground yourself in the physical reality you currently inhabit.
I am literally going to go make a PB&J as soon as we finish recording. It's medicinal now.
Highly recommended.
What's pillar number 2?
Number 2 is time. The future is not a pre-recorded movie that's just playing out on a screen. It is a dynamic script that is being constantly rewritten in real time. Every single small action you take, every casual person you meet, every tiny thought you alter shifts the entire probability field around you. You have immense agency.
Even missing a mundane meeting changes the gestalt.
Exactly. You are always at the steering wheel.
And pillar number 3.
Number 3 is the system. Whether it's your immediate family or your broader social history, look closely at the hidden connections. If someone in your life is driving you completely crazy, pause and ask what systemic function they might be serving for you. We are all part of a larger, interconnected gestalt. We are constantly, subconsciously balancing each other out.
That is such a powerful place to land, moving from blame to understanding the function.
It changes everything about how you relate to people.
Now listen, we have been talking for quite a while, diving deep into these concepts, but we have barely even scratched the surface of what is contained in the broader Seth material.
Not even close. This was just one single session out of literally thousands.
Absolutely. So if this discussion sparks something in you today, if you want to truly understand the deeper mechanics of reality, you need to go straight to the source material. Don't just take our interpretation for it.
We strongly, strongly recommend you pick up the original Seth material books.
Specifically, for the topics we covered today, check out the early sessions. You can find all of them over at the New Awareness Network website. That URL is sethcenter.com, the early sessions.
Yes, please support the publishers. They are the ones doing the heavy lifting of keeping this profound wisdom available and accessible to the world.
And I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to chew on. Seth stated very clearly that the future changes in the present moment.
The 5% rule.
Right. That means that right now, simply by listening to this deep dive, just by actively entertaining these new, strange ideas for the last hour, you have effectively shifted your own timeline.
Think about that. Maybe you just successfully avoided a probability where you stayed stuck in an old pattern. Maybe you just kicked open a door to a new probability where you finally understand your family dynamics better.
Or maybe you just opened a highly specific probability where you eat way more peanut butter than you used to.
Hey, either way, it's a win.
It really is. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today. Stay curious, stay relaxed, and we will see you in the next probability.
See you there.